If you're a founder scaling past 5 million and you're starting to see that hustle and brain power alone won't take you to 50 million, the story's for you. The way you've been running things won't be the way that gets you to the next level. My name's Chad McFarlin. I've been growing game teams from 4 to 400 people. I help build companies from nothing to nearly $1 billion in revenue. And I've made just about every mistake along the way. I started out like most of you, deep in the details, and at 20 years old, I was lucky enough to work for Nintendo, where I learned something almost by accident, that systems aren't red tape. They're what give you your edge. And this isn't an overnight success story, no magic moments, no lucky breaks. It's about learning to teach your team to step up so you're not doing it all yourself, to grow through that chaos without losing speed, to build teams that can handle pressure and keep moving, to set rhythms that make progress steady and compounding. And the tools I'll share didn't come from theory. They were built under fire, launching new consoles, running $50 million game teams, pulling projects back from the brink, and figuring out how to make leadership work for the long haul. And if you're running at full tilt and know it's not sustainable, if your team is solid, but you want them to be world-class, if your market is moving faster than your current setup can handle, the story's for you too. Scaling isn't about working harder or being the smartest. It's about building systems that give you leverage. So let me take you back to a small Nintendo booth where I learned that a simple checklist could beat raw talent every time. And that one insight grew into a lot of what I do today. And along the way, I built TV shows and I scaled studios and I launched startups. And now I'm helping founders like you build operating systems that can actually scale. The lessons I'm about to share took me 25 years. Some cost me millions and some nearly cost me my health and relationships. But they don't have to take you 25 years. Let's get into it. So at 20, I started my career at Nintendo. And I remember one of my first lessons there was all about some of the systems and processes that you had to do to really create a successful promotional program, because I started in their marketing department. I was actually working for an agency that was contracted by Nintendo. They would set up sampling at grocery stores and malls and festivals and that sort of thing to give away different product, stickers or makeup or butter at grocery stores and stuff like that. They weren't experts on games, but they knew how to sample things, how to talk to the public. So we got trained up in, I think we had like a few hours of training and a binder they gave us, and then they sent us out to talk to people. And I think it really helped me out is that I was playing video games, my entire life. I was really comfortable with them, and the people coming in to play was, it was a fairly easy, fun job. They were just like kids coming in to play. I'm always thinking of what would be like something super fun to do while they're at this exhibit at Playland is maybe have a competition. So I remember that first year we were just running little daily competitions and giving away prizes. I kind of learned fairly quickly on how to set that up and how to set up a contest and how to create, brackets and that sort of thing so that you could have a huge group of people be engaged and have some fun around one of the big games that we were promoting. And at that time, that was a Mario Kart game on the Nintendo 64 was big. So we had this whole structure for that. And that was super fun to do. I remember then taking that and writing it down and creating just like a step process and maybe a little script for the other team members to do that I thought was like the best way to do it so they could do it without me. Because I think on part that, I wasn't there at the booth the whole time. And, some of them I think wanted to run the contest and they liked how I was doing it. So they wanted to understand how to do it, even though I kind of just figured it out. But, writing it down, then we could look at it. And if there was an addition or a change that we wanted to do, we, made some adjustments to it. And that was our first SOP, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. But we actually started with that and adapted it, like how we even created things for how to engage people, how to talk to people, how to work with kids that were fighting over controllers. There's so many situations that we ended up just building like the best practices on how we figured out how to deal with all these situations and just made notes. And I think it was just two of us were hired at the beginning. And, by the end of the summer, there was probably like about 15 or 20 during the P&E because it was open from very early in the morning to fairly late at night. So we had to have a lot of people there, and there's just so many more people coming through who we hired up. So as these people came onto the team, uh, our agency was based out of Toronto, so they weren't doing the training. They kind of just left it up to us who were already hired. This is the first time that I was doing some interviews and that sort of thing to see who might be a good fit. So there's lots of learning in there, lots of understanding of like how to create systems and processes so that we could just run it more efficiently. We even had like a checklist that we designed to open up and close down the pavilion just to make sure that we didn't lose anything or miss anything because we had to make sure everything was locked up and put away and nothing was left out and everything was clean for the next group to come in. So anyway, it was just some systems that because we're a small team, we just kind of figured out on our own. But later on, I could see like obviously when you're working with any team, we now know how important all these SOPs and everything that we do are pretty cool and how to deal with these situations. Like once someone figured out how to deal with something, well, then we'd make a note. We gotta share it with everyone and have like a quick little, team meeting at midday or end of the day where we would pass on the notes and just talk about the day. Really, I don't know if it was very formal, but we were, yeah, we were having like a team meeting and a debrief, what worked well and what didn't. Not in any particular structure. We didn't really have the language for it or really know how to do it, but we started doing all those things. And I think that was obviously that was pretty amazing. It was interesting because after that summer, I was able to stay on with Nintendo and work for them directly. They actually had a interesting project where they had a whole bunch of their accounting that was not making sense. So they had me work on their returns policies and just seeing if I could figure out the problem that was based on the inventory that was being returned and what was actually showing up in their system on returns and try to figure out what was going on. I think they felt like that possibly the retailers were saying they were sending back more than they actually were. And, sure enough, as I was looking into this and matching up all these paper documents of, what was actually in the system and then what was returned and going through all these filing boxes. I mean, it was an absolute mess, but it was, maybe just like a point of perseverance and really understanding a puzzle and finding out why there was such a discrepancy and how much time and energy would need to go into actually sitting down and looking at a problem to find out, what is the possible solution with a lot of just sweat and time. It was a brutal job, but for several weeks, I looked through and figured out this old SAP business inventory system and matched up the returns and actually figured out that I think it was close to $30 million that I was able to get back from the different retailers for Nintendo. So it felt good because I could see that. I guess there was a piece of me that felt like even though they're a big company like Nintendo, but their partners were, taking advantage of them because like what they would actually have to do is verify and match things up based on the physical return to what they actually said was returned in the system. So it was actually interesting because I then, moved on from that project. I got to actually organize Mario's 10th anniversary party, which was really cool. I think that was one of the next big moments for me because obviously it was the first big project I was working at this time directly for Nintendo. And I obviously wanted it to be awesome. So I was definitely a lot more maybe just passionate and, just wanting to everything to be perfect. So we're actually working with Famous Players, which was a theater chain. And we were putting these birthday parties on across the country. The kids didn't know it at the time, but we're bringing in Nintendo and cake and jugglers and all kinds of really cool stuff to go at the beginning of Toy Story. So it was a huge promotion. It was super fun, but coordinating all that, all the logistics of all that was huge, and getting all that stuff into the theaters was huge. So we had to have a lot of coordination. I still remember there was the woman at Famous Players that I was working directly with, and she was really smart and high up. So they didn't have a lot of like coordinating marketing positions. She was like a director or a vice president. And I would assume at that time she was probably in her 30s or 40s, probably with like 15, 20 years of experience. And she's working with me that's, fresh out of university. Anyway, I still remember emailing her and following up by phone. I think I was calling for like 3 or 4 days and wasn't getting an answer, like nothing back. And I was getting worried because my boss wanted an update on the status of it. So I was feeling like, oh my God, I can't screw up. I need to know where things are. I can't go into a meeting saying I don't know. I haven't heard back without really trying to follow up and see where things were. I couldn't get in touch with her. So I found the next person on the list that I could see was in the email, which was her boss. And you got to remember at this time, I didn't really appreciate the hierarchy in businesses. So when I went above her and phoned him up and just said, "Hey, you know, chat from 10, I'm putting this, 10th birthday party together. I just really wanted to get an update. I'm not sure why this person hasn't got back to me a bit, and just wanted to know the status of these things. If you could give me a call back, I would really appreciate it and just give me an update." Well, he just forwarded that message to the person that should be calling me back. So I guess she kind of felt like she got into a little bit of trouble on that. So when she phoned me up, she really reamed me out. She was like, "Who do you think you are, going above my head and calling me out in front of my boss? How old are you?" And I was like, I don't know if that matters. You weren't getting back to me, and I just was trying to find someone that could help me out. Anyway, she's like, "You're just out of school, aren't you? You're nothing." She was threatening all this stuff. I just remember it was a horrible conversation. I hung up, and I just remember being at my desk going, wow, that really sucks. I really pissed this person off. What do I do here? And probably, I don't know how long after that, it was probably only about 5 or 10 minutes. Ron, who was my boss at the time, came over and he's like, "Chad," he's like, "how's it going?" And he could tell something was up with me. I was like, "Oh, I just got off the phone with this person at Famous Players, and yeah, she's not too happy." And he's like, "Yeah, she just called me." Anyway, he was cool about it. He's like, "Hey, you know what? I understand you're just following up and you weren't getting answers, and that's totally cool. But give her a call back, and you just got to eat your humble pie sometimes." And I was like, what the hell do you mean?" He's like, "Just apologize, say that you were wrong, and eat your humble pie, because it's not worth it. Right and wrong, it doesn't matter. She feels offended, and you need to address that and move on." He's like, "I understand you just doing what you need to do, but there's some finesse that I'm gonna have to learn." And he was just really cool. I think if you wanted an example of a really great boss that really supported you and said what he needed to say without making you feel horrific or put down, Ron definitely had a great way of doing that. So I gave the woman a call and apologized, and it was just a very successful promotion. I remember after that, it was amazing because a lot of the kids that went to the party ended up mailing Nintendo and thanking them for what such an amazing party. I remember at a few of the locations, the bigger locations, Mario didn't show up. I think there was a problem with shipping, and the Mario costume wasn't there, or got shipped like the day late, or just some they didn't clear customs, or whatever happened, it didn't make it there. And I remember just feeling horrible at the moment and just going, "Oh my God, these kids are gonna be so disappointed." But you know what? There was still the jugglers, there's still cake and other things that we organize. And you know what? No one even noticed that Mario wasn't there. And I could see that with all this feedback from the kids. So it was like, when you're putting these events together or doing anything, it's really like focus on what matters. What are the people going to remember? Also on setting expectations. There's no expectation there was Mario going to be there, so they didn't know what they were missing on. But if I would have said that Mario was going to be there and it didn't show up, then they probably would have been disappointed. So huge learning from that moment, and that was pretty cool. I was glad that it was a success, because that allowed me to move on and move into, where it actually took all those programs internally and to Nintendo. I worked directly at Nintendo. Even started working before I even graduated university in a part-time capacity, which was really tough because I was kind of setting up these programs and doing my final exams and hiring people in Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver to, get the programs going. And yeah, it was pretty cool because I think that was the first time really stepping into a leadership position and understanding the systems and processes to hire, how to look for good people. I didn't know who to hire, and we had like maybe 400 to 500 people at some of these locations that wanted to work at the different pavilions. Man, I would start at 8 a.m. and end at, God, sometimes I think it was after dinner, and doing interviews every half hour. It was just booked solid. I would just grab a sandwich or, take a few bites in between. But what that allowed me to do is really understand how to ask questions, what worked and didn't work, and really got like, built up just such an experience for doing that for so many years and hiring so many people. It really helped me understand, what worked and what didn't. Anyway, it was just a lot of understanding like the type of questions you ask in interviews, how to frame it. I remember doing a lot of research and then using my own intuition and just really understanding what were doing. I didn't really appreciate or understand that these were always like already systems and things that successful companies did. We weren't guided a lot on what to do. At least I wasn't coached a lot on what to do. Everyone was so busy at these different companies that I worked for. I did have a good manager that came on that helped support me in some ways, but in some ways that these systems I just had to figure out for myself, which was really cool. But looking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, I was building the systems and process to be successful. I was engaging my leaders in these different cities to help improve those systems, to gather feedback. And then when we updated a system, we had this feedback loop that constantly evolved our processes. And it was just exciting to do that. I really loved the time there and building those programs. I think I did that for 5 years at Nintendo. So every year we would do a big hire and build those systems up. And they just got bigger and better. And eventually it wasn't just, a little promotion that we're giving away Nintendo stuff for. I actually put together this Canada-wide promotion with Subway and the theater chain Famous Players, and I think a few other companies, so that when you were actually playing this game, you would win a massive prize. I think that, we gave away like free Subway sandwiches for a year to a winner is something really crazy. And so there's a lot of really cool programs and stuff we did. And I actually initiated that. Like I was like, we got Nintendo here. We're just giving away games, but wouldn't it be more fun if we bring in some other sponsors to really build it up? It was like, hey, let's just do more stuff together. We can promote the new movies that are coming out. For Famous Players, we had these big screens, projector screens at these exhibits, and we could put up their promotion, have it sponsored by these people, and then run the contests that we're doing and promoting whatever game we had at that time, which was, we even got a lot of the news companies to come out and different papers and that um, to take note of the competition and film some of it. And yeah, that was super fun at end of the summer. Just like a gut level of like, hey, this would be cool or this would be fun to do. And not really positioning as, oh, this is a way to build brand and engage with your customers and do growth, grassroots level marketing. Wasn't really through that lens. It was just mostly through, hey, how can we make this more fun and exciting for the kids that were coming down and playing. Also Nintendo, which was great, I was able to do there was become the Pokemon spokesperson. And that was actually a funny way that I got into doing that, because what ended up happening, it was right after Virtual Boy. And you probably haven't heard of Virtual Boy because Virtual Boy was a total bomb by Nintendo. It was the first 3D interactive game unit that you actually look through a device and you could see things in 3D. It was a bomb. So the Pokemon came out right after that. So this huge bomb, and then this Pokemon came out, and it was kind of these weird creatures, and they looked a little bit more maybe geared to a Japanese audience. So a lot of people in North America didn't think it was going to work in North America. But anyway, the new game came in. I remember it was all in Japanese, and I had the manual there that had all the translations, and I just started playing. It was pretty cool, and I know that Ron, my boss, came by again, and he was like, "I tried to do it, I couldn't figure it out." Like, I'm like, "Yeah, but they got all the translations, just take me a bit. I think I'm picking it up." So anyway, I remember that first night that I had it. I stayed, I don't know how many hours at Nintendo, and the next day, I even was excited to go back into work early and play it before I had to get doing some things. And I think Ron saw me stay late that the second night, and he just started asking me questions of like, what do I like about it? And I remember going into it going, oh, the game mechanics, amazing. You get these different attacks and that sort of thing. And it's a really cool animation. The characters are really cool. I just said, this thing's amazing. I think it's going to be a huge hit. He asked me later that day because they were actually doing a forecasting meeting, and he wanted me to come into that meeting. He went and grabbed me, and I went in, and it was all the executives were in there. I'm Nintendo, and they're planning out their Q4 forecast. I was like, "Hey, tell everyone what you think of Pokemon." I just let her rip and just said, "I think it's gonna be huge." Basically, it was just an amazing game. So I remember coming out of that, and at the end of that meeting, Ron came over, and he had like the Pokemon press kit, like this huge document of like how to talk about it and promote it. And he just dumped on my desk. He goes, "Read that. You're now the Pokemon spokesperson." So I think that was being in the right place at the right time. And then from there, I actually needed to do a whole bunch of training. So it was the first time that I actually worked with a PR agency, and they would film me, and we went through mock interviews, and I had all this amazing training to get me ready to go across the country and do interviews at morning shows and, evening shows, and newspapers would interview. And I drove across. They actually converted a VW Beetle, a yellow one, into Pikachu. And so I drove this thing across the country, stopping in at everywhere you can imagine to do interviews and promote the game. That was an amazing project. Is really understanding like how to get your pitch down to just a few key things. Like I would have like, here's what you would say if you have a 5-minute segment. Here's something if you have for newspapers, if they just want a couple of sound bites that that they need for their article, or if you're going on the evening thing, you might only have 30 seconds. So how to get the concept across very quickly, how to address, because at that time there was a lot of video game violence and how awful video games were, and they were creating a lot of violence in kids. Or there's a lot of really tough questions about how is Nintendo going to deal with Sega, because Sega was actually beating Nintendo at that time, if you can imagine that. So that was the big question. It was like, how do you deal with these tough answers? And there's very cool stuff. I still remember it was like, you never answer it directly. You never say the competition's name. So I would never say Sega. I would just be like, well, Nintendo, we're doing this. This is what's great about this Pokemon game. This is the values. These are the cool things that you get to do in it. And we're just really excited about that, and just really kind of divert into the message that we want to do. So it was really cool training. And I remember doing that in those interviews. There's a lot of reporters would just keep hammering you, and they would make you feel uncomfortable, and they tried to dominate. I remember feeling very intimidated in some of those interviews because I was young. I was only like 21 at the time, or 20. I'm so glad I had that training so I could go into those meetings and knew exactly how to answer that. And I think that in business, you need to really educate and help your team succeed. And I think like having all that training is so valuable, and having any of your front end staff to have that training to deal with difficult questions and difficult customers, and be able to communicate your product in a way that's very succinct and concise that really shows the value is like some of the things that I picked up on doing that. And I know the first few interviews didn't go very well, but a few months into that promotion, it actually ended up doing really well. I think the final cool thing I got to do at Nintendo was launch their website, their first website, which was absolutely an amazing process. I think that was my first look into or experience entrepreneurship, because there's this new company that was come up. They're still around now, but they're just 5 guys that just graduated from film school that created a company to build websites. And we didn't have a website. That wasn't something big that Nintendo wanted to do, but I thought if I could work with this company and put together a proposal, I could sell it in and do it. And I just thought this was the next best thing. And I could see how it could be a really cool thing to be able to promote a lot of the things that I was doing at the different pavilions across Canada, the competitions that we're doing, all the stuff that I was doing up at Whistler and a lot of the other ski hills, the big promotions we were doing around 1080 snowboarding. So I remember working with Lee there and working out, and it was actually really cool. We got the site launch, but what I saw in that is that they utilized my relationship to go a step up and get into other departments at Nintendo, and even from that, then move into like companies like Nike and some of these other big, huge clients that they got, and they used me as a reference, and that was part of the exchange that we did. And, like, over just a few years, I saw them go from, like, 5 guys up to, a team of 50, 100, 200 people. And I think that was the first time that I was like, "Wow, you can start something." And these guys that were building this company, I felt like I had a similar skill set that I could do this. And it was interesting right at that time, Victor Lucas, gave me, a call. He had a video game TV show that he was promoting. Nintendo was put some money into the pilot episode, but after that pilot episode was filmed, he came back in to present, hey, he wants to do a series now based on this, and he just thought that was what it needed to do. And when he sat down and pitched, I actually got to be in the room. He then left and then gave me a call, and he was like, "So how did I go?" And I think it was at the end of the day, and I was like, "Yeah, it was good, man. Yeah, you did great." And he was like, "No, really, how did I do? Like, give it to me straight." And, I just took a deep breath and I was like, I think he wants to hear it. So I just laid it out for him. Like, he had no business sense. He was talking about how cool Nintendo is, but not about how many eyeballs they are going to reach or how that was going to really help Nintendo. It was all about just how cool video games were and how cool the show would be. And it was nothing about really talking to Nintendo what they really needed to justify a marketing spend at all. It needed to show like who's it going to reach, how much of those impressions were going to be on TV. He never talked to any of that stuff. So I just laid it all out for him on what I experienced from his pitch to how I would have done it. And I still remember what he said then. He was like, Chad, you got to come work for me. We got to do this. We got to partner and do this. And I was like, hey, man, Nintendo's pretty good. I think I'll stick around here. But Victor was, he definitely had perseverance. And I learned a lot about perseverance and how to follow up from him. What ended up happening next within a month or two is I got to sit down with Martin Ray and got another guy from Orca Bay Capital that was investing money. And Martin Ray is a really bright guy. And he was talking about what he sees in Victor and the company and how they're investing in it. They put some seed money in and they wanted me to come on to really help with the sales and promotion and production. And he felt like I could really help out. So I went in and Matt, I was young. I was still in my 20s at that time, but I knew that there was something there and it was something really exciting because it was at that time, it was right when the internet was coming out. There was this convergence of media and that was a big thing. It was like the stuff that was happening on TV was going to meld into the internet. So these episodes that were put on TV would be able to be accessed online and viewed online at any time. And this is where the future was. And obviously that made sense now looking back on it, but it was something that right at the beginning of that, if you've never seen anything like that, it was a really cool and exciting idea. I moved on from Nintendo to the Electric Playground and help build that out over the next few years. And I think that what really helped was really seeing and experiencing the entrepreneurship from Blast Radius and really helping them move up on how you could, just with a lot of perseverance and connections and selling and marketing and having the right product market fit, you could really grow and scale a company. Like we were starting just from scratch there. It was just a real amazing time to to build something and do something. I was put in charge of, running more of the business aspect, the marketing and sales aspect of it. We needed to get distribution and money. So first thing is to get sponsorship from the different video game companies and other people that we knew. So we brought that in and secured that, and to increase our distribution around North America. And we were able to really do that by just relentlessly pitching. And I'll share a few stories. Like we went down to one of the TV conferences in New Orleans. I think it was Napa, and we just went around and pitched everyone we could. We couldn't get meetings with anyone, but we just went down there and just went from booth to booth. And we eventually got into one of the talks that had Charlie Humbert from Discovery speaking, a really, really smart guy. And after the talk, there's a lineup to meet him and chat, and he stayed for a little bit to answer questions. And anyway, we got him that lineup and actually pitched him, gave him our, 30-second elevator pitch, and he asked some questions, and he actually made time for us to meet. And we later did one of the first big deals with him on getting on Discovery Digital, got that, our video game show onto that. And that's when we got to work with like real TV production people. Like we had some brilliant people that moved, I think, from Discovery main channel to this digital channel as promotions. But these were really top-notch producers and TV executives that really helped us understand how to produce TV. It was really how to look at TV, how to manage TV, how to budget it and systematize it, and all the systems and processes that really made a top-notch TV show. So obviously that was huge education for us. And during that show too, we actually met one of the agents at one of the big firms that represent all the big stars at the time. So all the big actors were at this agency, and then one of the guys that represented those agents were actually at the TV show, and we saw him. And I think he was in another talk. We got his name. We eventually saw him go into the washroom, and we actually followed him. Not saying that you should do this to anyone, but it was bad. Anyway, we followed him in and pitched him and talked to him, after he was done, and, washing his hands and that, and introduced ourselves and followed him out of the washroom and eventually got his card. This is actually super funny. I love telling the story because I think I followed up with him every week or every few days. It kind of was every few days and every week. Then, I just kept on and kept on and kept on beyond what I thought was good. And you got to remember, I just shared the story about the famous players when I followed up too much and got, got shut down. But this was maybe a little bit different. And I'll give it up to Victor. He really was really pushing me all the time. Is keep following up, just keep following up. What this guy had is that you wouldn't actually get to him, you would get to his assistant. And I remember the first 3 months, he went through a few assistants. So I was just making friends with new assistants every couple of months, and he was always busy. He was never taking our calls, and we just kept going. I don't know if it was like over 6 months or 9 months or a year or what it was, but I remember it was a very long time. It was probably less than a year, but more than 6 months. I was following up like every couple of days to every week. So it was a lot of calls by email and by phone. And I remember a lot of the assistants were like, he's not taking your call, man, like quit phoning back. And I was like, well, I need to, we met him at the conference. He said to follow up because there might be something there. Really want to chat with him. We just kept going, and I made friends with them, and they would check. They were really nice assistants. Hopefully got fired because of me. We were just relentless on trying to get the show out there. And I was doing this with a lot of people, trying to follow up with them and get time with them to be able to pitch them. And we were successful a lot of times. I remember this is the type of stuff we need to do when you're a startup. I would fly out to a city that we wanted to get the show aired on a local channel, and I would just go to the TV channel and just wait in the lobby until they would see me. And eventually I'd get maybe 15 minutes in between meetings, and I would pitch them. And hopefully they would see that it was a really good program and a good deal for their station. And we were able to sign them. So that was the type of stuff that we needed to do. It was a lot of perseverance and not accepting like missed calls. Like we needed to get a firm no. And even with a no, we were like, how can we convert this? That was the whole I think energy behind our startup. So that's the context because I just kept going. This guy kept phoning and phoning and phoning, and maybe it was a little bit ridiculous, but one day he picked up, he finally got on the phone. I mean, I remember him screaming at me over the phone. I've never had anyone scream like that, telling me to F this, that I was a F whatever. I mean, he was swearing at me probably for, I don't know. I remember holding the phone out to people, and everyone in the office, like Victor could hear, and a few other the people around, and this guy was just screaming. And I was like, wow, he is still screaming. And I put my hand, back on the receiver, and he's like, "Do you understand? Don't effing phone here again, you effing idiot." And then he threw the phone. I heard it bang, smash. And I guess it went onto the assistant's desk, and the assistant picked it up and said, "Chad, is that clear?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's totally clear. Thanks for putting me through. Have a great day. Thanks again." And, I think they hung up before I could say bye. But anyway, so I hung up. And I was like, how do we follow up with this guy? And anyway, so what I decided to do, and I remember talking about with Victor, we were kind of going back and forth, like what to say. And I was like, oh, I just have to really just have the frame of sounds like I caught you on a busy day. So I think I said exactly, hey, looks like I caught you on a busy time. I hope your day gets better. But I just want you to know that I think we're really onto something with our video game TV show. I know we'll cross paths again in the future. I just wish you all the best, and I hope there's a time that we can reconnect and talk in the future. So that was obviously super aggressive. Obviously, there's a lot there. I wish him the best. You know what he actually did is he actually emailed me right back and said, "Wow, you are so persistent. Yes, you got me on a bad day and a bad moment." And he said something like, "I wish you all the best." Fast forward a few years, 9/11 happened. And right after that, 2 months after that, one of the big agency guys his name was Ari, was putting together, he was getting all the stars together to do a fundraiser for the victims of 9/11. And so he was putting that big thing on. And I remember through that, for some reason, it was right around that time, someone gave us a call and said that Ari wants to speak to you. I remember at that time we started typing in who it was on the internet. We're trying to find out who this guy was, and we're like, "Is this the guy organizing that big event that was actually calling us?" And sure enough, he was. And we got on a call with him, and he's like, "Hey, so this is Chad with the video game show." And I'm like, "Yeah, you got him." He's like, "Oh, I've heard lots about you guys. Well, we want to get into video games." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds great." And he's like, "Yeah, tell me about your show. What's going on?" So I gave him the pitch, I gave him the vision, what we were doing. He's like, "Ah, that's exciting. You know what? I'm going to get my best guy on this." And guess who that guy was? It was the guy from years previously that was swearing at us. Anyway, he got on the phone and he said, "This is Chad from Electric Playground. He's got a video game TV show. Work with him and figure out what we can do because I want to get into video games. I see this as a huge thing, growth opportunity. You guys figure it out." And then he was like, "Chad, I got to go. I'll leave you in the capable hands of this gentleman. And I wish you all the best. I hope we can do some work together." And he left, and that was it. For him, we saved the phone. Obviously, this guy was on there, and I remember it was just like this beautiful moment of, wow, you guys, here you are. And he's like, "Okay, I guess I'm following up with you. What can we do to work with you?" It was a very interesting moment there. I'll remember that probably for the rest of my life. You never know who all your relationships and how you're going to cross at different points in your life. And I think like going into every conversation and everything you do with that same level of integrity and win for all attitude and curiosity and just being good natured, I think has really served me well. And I think that obviously it served me really well in this opportunity because I never got mad at this guy. I never called him out. It was like, "Hey, sounds like you're having a bad day." And we looked at some stuff. I don't know if anything really built. We had a whole bunch of opportunities that we were looking at that time, and it totally grew and went into a different direction. But I think that was such a huge moment for me. And it's interesting when you keep at something, you can really create, because all of a sudden we're at almost like an equal level in it. Before we're just pitching. So maybe for some of those people out there that are at different stages in your company, stick with it, because you never know how things can come around. And also, like, really just treat everyone well. I think that's one of the best things, that lessons that I've had. We can all have bad days and that, but we shouldn't take it out on the people around us. That's our own work to do. The other stuff with Electric Playroom, there's so much there that I learned on how to sell and how to pitch and get into big meetings and how to optimize the team. I remember at one time we figured out, I went and did the numbers with Victor, and I remember one of the episodes cost us like 100 grand to do. And I'm just like, we got to scale this down. So we just really started systematizing things, got rid of a bunch of stuff. And I think we got it down to under 20 grand. That was a huge thing. I think it wasn't something that the whole team wanted to do, but I could see it was the only way that we're going to be successful in long term, because we couldn't be producing a show on our budget that was costing that amount of money. There wasn't just the return. It just didn't make sense. I learned so much from that, because it was like I was coming from a standpoint of more of the systems and stuff that I was putting together before, more of this business background, to more of my partner at that time, where Victor was more of our organic, free flowing, more the visionary guy that had the vision and was more organic how he wanted to build and do things. And they're two very different styles, and it's very challenging to work with each other. And I think that with that, I learned so much. I learned, we didn't end up having I think we're on good terms now. Like, I just wish Vic all the best. I think at that time there was a lot of friction in what we were doing. And I think that if I could go back and like coach my younger self, and that it would be more about acknowledging what he wanted in those moments and what he wanted in the show. And I think it would have made a lot of those negotiations around like cutting the budget and getting those systems in a lot easier to do. You're just resolving conflict a lot better, and really leveraging each other's skills. The other thing was probably big then, that I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that have a partnership or going into a partnership, is just have such a clear way of dividing your roles, like who's going to be the final say on what. So have clear accountability, clear roles, and obviously getting feedback from each other and hopefully improving. But at the final say is really giving it down to that person. And I think that from there, I moved to EA, which had a lot of more systems and that in place. And I'm going to talk about that now, because I think it really relates. And I could really, when I look back on it, I was like, wow, I wish I would have had a lot of the stuff I know now to my younger self, because I think that first startup that I was involved with, like scaling it and really working with some really creative people, I would have been a lot more successful, and it would have a lot been easier for everyone on the team, because I was micromanaging. I was doing a lot of things that I think beginner or people just do naturally, because you're so passionate. You feel like I'm the only one that can do it, or I'm the best at it. But how do you really scale? You're going to have to trust people to do it, and to allow them to really build take on those things, to really build them and grow them. Like, there was some more good stuff and good learnings and wins from my time on Electric Playground. Like, we were able to get on to G4, which is a 24/7 video game channel, and it was exciting. I remember we went down and first met with Charles Hirschhorn, that was running Disney Television. And at that time, we didn't even know exactly who he was, but the head of Xbox introduced us, or passed on his card to us. And I was like, oh, I guess if this is coming from him, I should actually give him a call and make it happen. So we actually really talked before we went down there. We just met with his assistants, and then jumped on a plane and flew down to LA, and drove to the address. It didn't say anything about being Disney or anything like that, but we got on to obviously the Disney studios and got into their TV department and went up to the president of television. And it was an amazing time. He kind of took us through his vision. He was showing us all his eyeballs from the TV shows and everything that we're doing were going down. And we saw, he was like, where are all these eyeballs going? And he's like, video games seem to be going up and everyone's spending time there because there's only so much time in a day and so much leisure time. And he felt everyone's going from TV to video games. So how about making some TV about video games? He thought was a natural thing. And so that was pretty exciting. We were able to work out with him to be the only external producers to produce some shows for their launch. And we're actually with them for a number of years. And I think that was just really exciting to be a part of launching on that new network and creating a new format for their channel. At that time, too, we had to move on from the discovery and move on to this thing that was more dedicated, which we thought was a good fit. And just going through that whole process was obviously really cool. At the same time, we were sold to Hip Interactive because what we were actually doing at the time, too, is in addition to building the television show, another piece or department within our company that was actually headed up by my brother at the time, he's a technical genius, was actually doing an interactive player. So we were putting up all the shows online at the same time we were distributing them on TV. And what was the really cool thing about it was he was able to figure out a process to tag certain things in the video. So we would have at the same through this player the text reviews to come up. And we actually said at the same time we could bring up the link to actually buy that game online through the online distributor, which Hip Interactive owned. So we did a deal with them and they eventually bought us because they really liked what we were doing. So it was fascinating technology on how quickly we could have this interactive. And that was like the beginning, I would think, of interactive TV. You could watch a show about video games, see all the reviews about it, see what people were saying about it, and actually link in and buy it all from our players. So that was another big component of what we're doing, but was just so exciting to be a part of this convergence of media and technology, and you could really see where we're going with it. But it's very interesting. To give you an idea, when I was going out and pitching the electric playground to a lot of these big networks before Discovery, before G4, like my first conversations with a lot of the people were like, I swear to you, it's probably hard to believe, but they would say TV will never go on to the internet. So that's was just what they thought at the time. But I think it was just that generation of people that grew up without a lot of technology, and we needed to have that next generation get into those positions of power. And, some people could really see it like Disney Television and Discovery Digital. Both Georgie Humbert and Hirschhorn, they were there. They really saw where it was going and they took those initiatives. Obviously, we did too. And we could see it, we were building it, and we really saw this interactivity that was happening. So at that time, it was really cool to be a part of. We were just a startup that we got a few $1 million, and they were able to raise another 10 million through Hip Interactive, injected it into us. But over that time, I'm not too sure how much I can say about it, even at this stage. But maybe the high points is eventually we wanted to do. They wanted to. I think after a few years, they wanted to sell off. They weren't doing so well as a distributor, and they wanted to sell off the electric playground. And we did a management buyback, and I was actually in negotiations with the person they sent to negotiate it. What they were actually doing in the accounting thing was probably in a lot of gray accounting things, but because I was actually had that business background and understood that, I caught a lot of things that they were doing and was able to put together a really good proposal that was really a great win for us as an electric playground. We could build it. But I think that's where the disappointment happened, because I think that near the end of that, the co-founder of the electric playground, we had, I guess that was when the breakup happened, and I'll just leave it at that. That really felt, I guess, from my standpoint, I just felt like it was a betrayal because I thought we were on the same page, but that we weren't. All I can say is like the takeaway from this, even though you're working with people, and I would say this to all entrepreneurs that are out there that are in partnerships at the beginning of it, when I think the money is at a certain level. I think it's fairly easy to have maybe looser agreements. But I think as you're starting to scale and things are starting to become real, you really need to have those really concrete agreements in place. And I think the earlier the better in that. But I know sometimes it just doesn't make sense in reality. You have to get to a certain point where you can actually pay for some of those things to happen. But I would get those in place as soon as possible so that everyone's just on the same page, like with ownership and equity and all that stuff. I know that at that time I was always promised, oh, well, you're definitely having shares and all this, that kind of stuff. But it was all just words, and words don't really hold up in court that well unless you have something that is a tangible like document. There's some really great frameworks out there that with cliffs and stuff like that, where, you get only so many shares after every year in the company, and maybe after 4 years you get 100% of them, and that's all really great. There's some great systems out there, so just get it early and get everything squared away. I think that most people probably do that now, but at that time I didn't really pay the price for it. I've gone back and looked at that situation. So what could I have done? Obviously, communication, resolving conflict, getting on the same page. I think these are all really important. And when money comes into play, I always think that it even gets more important to get really clearer around stuff, because I think that there's always, if you don't have stuff down on paper, it's very easy to have miscommunication around those things. And you may have to have some really difficult conversations with your partner, and you need to do that in all your relationships. I always think that issues after the fact usually happen because you're not having those difficult conversations. And I really encourage everyone, if there's a difficult conversation you're not having, just do it, because it can really pay off. That's something that I really have built up systems and processes to have those difficult conversations, which is great. Another thing, I could go back to my younger self and wish I could coach them. Near the end there, one more thing happened with more of the processes that I would like to touch on, is that we were getting sponsorship from video game providers that also gave us their games to review. What ended up happening is that one of our big sponsors always was Nintendo, and I had a previous relationship there, but they also were a big supporter. They were one of the first sponsors of the show. They believed in it. They saw the benefits. They grew with us and they benefited by that. But what ended up happening within that last part when I was there, one of the final things was getting the final sponsorship together for that season that I was going to be involved with. And one of the games that came out, I forgot what game it was, but I remember the review that we gave on it it wasn't a horrible review, but it was just a neutral or maybe just a little bit above average. And my contact, who actually, because I worked there, I actually hired this person years earlier to come on. She was the person that was handling that part of the account. And she was really pushing really hard for us to increase the rating that we gave, that if we gave it a less of a rating, that they weren't going to sponsor the program. I remember they were ghosting me unless I was going to change stuff. And I was really, I guess from my standpoint is that, like, the business standpoint, like, they were buying time on episodes, and we would give them a special segment, but we weren't going to change reviews because that was more editorial. So we didn't have editorial mixed with the business stuff. And what I would do now is have an editorial policy that was in place, that to really talk about the separation between editorial and what we were doing in the business. The business side wouldn't affect it. Like, your sponsor couldn't use that influence to increase the rating of a game. Also, before the sponsorship would have, and during those negotiations, to really bring that up and to showcase that, hey, we have a real separation between the editorial and the business, and like that doesn't cross. So it really, if we're going to rate it the way that we rate it, that just because they're a sponsor of the show is not going to affect it. I think having some of those policies and those tough conversations earlier on would have really helped out this situation, because the sponsorship got removed. I think they came back on after I left, but I still think back on that. That really kind of stung. Probably from the relationship standpoint, obviously, but also from an integrity standpoint too, is that it just felt like and there was a little bit of a bullying too, because it was a lot of money was involved there. So anyway, that was some really good learning of, getting things documented, getting things in paper, having tough conversations. You can see some of the themes here that I still communicate and I can still see in a lot of the people I work with. But moving on from there, I was actually had a great opportunity. I started working at Electronic Arts, EA, and became a producer of their new division that was formed called Fusion that was looking at mobile games and last generation games. And because I had all this experience with coming from Nintendo and Game Boy and, you know, being involved with Pokemon, I really saw that people would be playing the games on like Game Boy devices. That's mobile gaming. I thought that's where it was going to be, and that's where I wanted to really what excited me at the time. I was doing some consulting for another company, and it was actually a Christmas party. I started talking to a recruiter at EA, and it was just I thought I was just talking to someone casually about things, and she was asking me about my background and how I knew the people at this company, and anyway, through that led to a conversation. And I'll go back to what I was talking about before about interviewing, and I think what Warren Wall headed up the division along with Dave McCarthy, Tony Lamb, Richard Seaborn. And these guys are just all brilliant, really exceptional people. And I got to meet Warren first, who interviewed me. And he was great. He was actually a really challenging interview. He really poked at me and really went through my resume and really tried to get a reaction out of me like several times. I'm sensitive to criticism, but I think in that moment, and thank God through all the learning and self development I've done, I didn't take it personally. So when he was poking at me, I was like, oh, that's interesting perspective. This is kind of how I thought about it. This is kind of what I did. I did my best. I thought, obviously, yeah, you got some interesting points there, but this is kind of my take on it. Thanks for that feedback. I think that's really helped me move forward and obviously got the job because I think he appreciated how I responded, but also on interviewing people, on challenging people and just seeing if how they respond to certain things to really get their honest feedback, I thought is really good because you want to have tough conversations all the time. And I think if you're direct and still being kind and professional, but having those tough conversations, even in interviews, I think are really important to do. Also, like obviously EA, we went in there, that fusion division, we started off with, I think it was only 4 of us at the time. We grew that up. And that was part of the growth that went up to like 400 people and from no sales to close to $1 billion in sales. So there's so much around scaling and building teams and hiring and systems and processes and dealing with issues because things were just moving so fast. And it was new technology and new people working together. And there's so much of it that was just an amazing process. Like I headed up Tiger Woods on PSP to work with Walter, who was the development director. And I think it was just such a great time to really learn about video game productions. Obviously, I came from a TV background, so I understood that world, but not video games. But I played a lot of video games, so that probably helped out a little bit. But it was mostly on just managing people and building people. But the systems that we employed and the stuff that we built there that was really brought by, I think, a combination of Tony Lamb and Richard Seaborn there. Richard was just an amazing individual. He's almost like a human computer. Loved working with him. I have so many cool stories about how he thought and I think his IQ was, off the charts type of thing. He was just a really exceptional person. But it was obviously a really challenging time. There was a lot of working through how to learn new technology, but how to manage teams, how to manage up, how not to do things like how to be in communication, how to work with my development director. Like there were so many things that we needed to work through and do. And we had some really good support. We had, some management training there. We had EA University that was absolutely amazing to go through. They put the managers through that really taught a lot of these like softer skills on how you would call them softer skills, like how to deal with people, how to resolve conflict in their own way, and how to like motivate people and how to negotiate things and talk about things as teams. And I think that was all really important. Even how to be creative. Like we even worked with a psychologist who there's a really cool process that we worked through on how to remove our creative blocks, which was in a group setting, which I thought was just an amazing thing to do in a group setting in a technology company, and we got exposed to so much there. I think some of the keys, obviously, we worked incredibly hard and worked through so many difficult problems. I think through just working hard and becoming the best at polishing things and getting better at things. There's something about putting that effort into something that you see as worthy, that you see as and doing work at that excellent level or the best you can, I think just evolves you in a way and being consistent. Cause I think that that first game took us a while to get through. I think it got extended, I think 2 or 3 times. Like the launch of PSP, I think was supposed to be for Christmas and then it was after Christmas. And we just basically kept filing and doing what we could to optimize the game. We created documents for how to provide updates, how to do designs, what to put in designs. We had a system, how to do like front end screens, exactly how to lay out a front end screen, how to comment on the button placement and coloring. And by those years in, we had everything pretty well systematized. There's probably even more we need to do because video games are so big, but just from communication upward to communication on the team to how to actually design it and move on. Like that was just really a master class, and I got to work with so many amazing people there. And maybe I'll just share for those creative people out there a story about one of the gentlemen that he actually, I think he was the creator, and I could get this wrong, but he worked on Toy Story. I think he could have created or worked on Buzz Lightyear, the Lucas Arts. He did like Han Solo's gun and the Millennium Falcon. Anyway, I know that he worked on some major designs in film, and it was really interesting because this guy was so humble. And I remember we were iterating on game design, and we already went through a few iterations of it. And I thought, like, wow, we're on like the third iteration of this thing and this massive overhaul. And I just felt like, wow, this really sucks on how you have to keep like iterating and iterating this thing. And he was telling a story, and I would just, if I'm right or wrong, and let's just use Buzz Lightyear when he was working on that. He said that he made like the model for it, I think like 300 times. Over those 300 times, he eventually got to a point where he just chucked it all out. And this was over like, I don't know if it was a year or 9 months. I mean, it was over an incredible amount of time. He just chucked it all out and started from scratch, and he eventually got it. I don't know if it was on the 20th or 30th revision of that. But even the best, most creative people in the world have to do a lot of iteration to really get that polish. So when we're looking at, entrepreneurs like looking at a game or, if you're on the business side, looking at your pitch or your presentation, the amount of prep and work and iteration you put into things, I think is such a big part of the game. And when we talk about like, what does that look like to really get to that excellence? It is that continual refinement of an idea to keep polishing and polishing and polishing. And obviously it gets to a point where, you're getting diminishing returns, but it does, to get really to that excellence, does take that perseverance and that consistency, and to really be willing to, like this creator and designer, to scrap all the work that he worked on for a year and start from scratch to really build something that is iconic. Another thing on like design philosophies that I can think and apply across companies is on The Sims, they had a type of thing that was like the 10 commandments of that game, like code to that game. And I think that you can relate to your business of like how you go about things. You have your values, maybe your code of conduct, but they had it laid out for this game. And I just saw that so brilliantly executed is they would go through these commandments, these game design commandments on how they would go about doing anything in the game. And I thought that was so beautiful. And I think like some of the things for The Sims is what was like a success or failing in the game was going to be rewarded equally. So if you had a win in The Sims, they obviously had a lot of visual reinforcement for it. But also if you failed, and if anyone's played The Sims, if you like caught your sim got caught on fire, there was you would dance around, run around, and it was a big animation and or a lot of reward. But that was actually in their commandments, so they had to look at that as every sim, no matter what you did, if it was success or failure, it had to have a big reward. And that just really changed the way that the Sims interacted. But I think that some of those things that you can see how that relates to business on how you go about building your software or building your company and your culture. There's certain frameworks or standards that you can go to that I think really help out. And I'll share a story later on when I moved from Electronic Arts and actually went from that game to moved over to Relic Entertainment and took on a beginning of a game team that was going to launch a game for the next generation consoles. So they were Relic at that time was a PC gamer, PC. They just brought out one game that was on console that didn't do that well, and they wanted to move harder into it. I'd love to share some of those stories because I went from EA, great job, but I thought it was a time where I think I had some group producer experience, being able to lead teams, multiple projects, and I wanted to move into the next generation consoles and work with like a really high performing team. And Relic is known for that. They're one of the, I think even to this day, they're known for making some really great games. And in that DNA, they had some of the original guys. So they just got off of Company Heroes that I think for an RTS game was, rated up there in the 90s. And a lot of those people were, they've moved on to other games and they've worked for other companies like Blizzard and been a part of major franchises that have done the same kind of success. But that team was absolutely amazing. And, before I got there, that I didn't appreciate is that 15 of these developers and designers were put into a room and, their goal was come up with the next great game, the next great idea. I didn't really appreciate it until I really got in there in the first couple of weeks on how much conflict and how tough it had been for them. And this is all the stuff that I've learned and I talk about more in my videos is just that when you have like a lot of really high performing people that have just had a huge success, what's actually happening on the mindset of it is like there's huge risk to fail, right? So when you're just starting, failing is no big deal, but when you've reached a big success, it actually is really hard to take chances because you might fail and you want to be, I guess, your identity and a lot of things are going on there. So anyway, I got into this in the first couple of weeks in January. I think the team already went from 15 to down to 10. There was a bunch of people that were ready to quit. I still remember Drew, who was the senior engineer. I think he already gave notice or he gave notice maybe the first or second day I was there for his 2 weeks to move on to another game team because he had enough with this process as well, which was difficult to hear. But I got in there and I think, really get into the meat of it is you had a lot of people, they wouldn't make decisions. So they wouldn't just take a step forward. There's many different ways to move forward with the game and they didn't know how to move forward. They didn't want to risk and they were just locked. No, nothing could move forward. They couldn't get consensus. So being a new person on there, I think it was a great opportunity for me to come in and very simple. I maybe just got the lay of the land and I was like, okay, I know what we need to do here based on some of my previous experience. And what I just saw on the team is we needed to set a weekly goal. So we just did Scrum was getting really good and doing sprints. So we did a 1 week sprint and we were to set a goal and end on a Friday and the next sprint would start on the Monday and move through and we do a quick little retrospective. But in that, it was like, how do you get this team moving forward? And I remember this huge design decision they thought was huge, but the team wasn't moving forward. I remember going in there and just hearing it. I'm like, let's just do this. And I didn't even have enough, but I said it with enough confidence and said, how I see this, guys, is we're going up this mountain and, there's maybe multiple ways. We have like the fog of war, like we don't know which way is the best, but there's multiple ways that look pretty good. Let's choose this one because it looks like it's the best. We're never going to have perfect information. But if we start going up here and we see that this is definitely wrong, we can just stop and go to the next way up the mountain. So this one works the best, doesn't it? Got the agreement and we moved on. That was really it. Is like we just like shortening the goals, make it more concise, removing maybe some of the risk from the team and some of the fear, because that's what was going on. And, from then on, we were just banging out every week. That team was really cruising. It was really amazing. We really developed something amazing over that time, like moving right from pre-production to production. And it was just so cool. I know I talked about this in a podcast I was on, and I'll go into it maybe just a bit here, is like during that, it was like so many things on scaling because we went from, just a few people up to 40 or yeah, it was 40 or 50 people. And then during a big push for E3, we almost doubled or tripled in that time and had to get everyone working and resolving. And I think one of the biggest things that I saw that came up at that time, I think we were working, and it was like 2 years in on one of the prototypes, and we're actually working on one of the Marvel franchises, but it was Relic that was owned by THQ. I think at that Christmas, I think it could have been Iron Man or one of the big Marvel franchises came out. And it was a huge success. So Marvel was coming back and they still hadn't inked the deal or made it totally official with THQ. So when they came back after that, they wanted more money and it was outside the budget. The head of the company, you got to think like I just like grew this team, did so many interviews and got so many great people from all around the world, from the UK, the States, over in Europe, Spain, Italy, France, from South America, Mexico. Like we were really a multicultural team. And like so many people moved here to work on this game. And all of a sudden, like they were like, yeah, we lost the license. So we're going to go make a 2D scroller. I think they wanted to do. And they wanted me to get rid of most of the team, which is really hard. I listened to the vice president at the time, what his goals were and what they needed to do. And I just thought that was just the wrong decision. So I remember really when we went back and I started talking to my leads and they were like, this makes no sense. I'm like, this is true. So let's just move forward and help me figure it out. But obviously they reported into me and I said, this is what we're going to do. We took the work we were doing on this Marvel game, excuse me, and we're going on to the Dawn of War franchise, which is all, Space Marines and that sort of thing. We could take those models and stick it on. So, Iron Man was a lot like a Space Marine, and we already had those models. So we were going to see if it could work on it and keep this third-person shooter multiplayer shooter that we're working on. It seemed to make a lot more sense for us rather than going into a 2D scroller that none of us on our team really had experience in developing or doing. So that would have been a massive learning curve. And I don't think it would have been a AAA title. Maybe we would have worked on maybe a mobile device or that sort of thing. But we didn't really see that as optimal. So assuming however we made that change, the heads of the studio, they really were big on the 2D scroller. And I didn't want to call them out on it. I remember they eventually saw that we're just doing the 3D shooter and they just, acquiesced. They were like, they didn't really point out or say, hey, we were wrong. That was a really dumb idea. This was the way to go forward. But they kind of knew that. And I think I tried to be as kind in that process because I knew it was the right way forward, but it was really hard to manage up. And I think in that moment, there was a huge piece of me that wanted to like go, see, this is what we should have done. But also, there's a part of me that could appreciate where they're coming from. It was resolved, but on the studio level, but unfortunately at the THQ level, the vice president, I remember, was pretty upset. I remember he said to me on the phone, he was yelling at me that he wanted me to fire the team and what I was doing was stupid. So that he was coming up again in a few weeks and he wanted to see what we're actually doing. So I had it up until that meeting. So I was like, wow, I got a few weeks and either we're going to do well or I'm going to get fired here. So anyway, we worked really hard. We figured out a whole bunch of things. And I think in that time, I really tried to use all the best practices and really apply it as much as I could. And really, I couldn't do it alone. So I was forced to really trust and empower the people around me. Because I remember one of the things that we needed to do is we needed to look sexy and cool for this demo. And it was a lot of our jobs were riding on it. And the budget of the game and everything. So it was like we had to make it look sexy. And the way to make it look sexy was we had to move up all the special effects and audio into our engine from this other game. And when we were originally talked to our engineers, they're like, oh, that's going to be a 6 to 9 month process. This is huge. This is like a massive endeavor. We can't do this. And I was like, you know what? I know you guys can do it. You got to figure this out in the next week, because then we got to actually move into this engine, then hook it up to the characters and all that. So you got to do this in the next week. I know the senior guys still remember having this conversation. I was like, you tell me what you need, You guys are brilliant. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to get it in. We just need to get through this phase and we can go back and, do it correctly or whatever, but figure out a way to translate these assets that we need into this engine that we had be built in. So going from an RTS game into a third-person shooter. And you know what? I just said that's the goal. Tell me who you need on your Scrum team, and we'll make it happen. And sure enough, I got all the best minds from Relic. Like we had so many brilliant people there and creative people, and sure enough, they figured it out. I wasn't part of any of that, but I think it was one of those things is that I didn't need to, and I don't think a lot of leaders needed to. I didn't have the technical know-how to understand that, but I set the objective in a very clear way. You had 1 week to translate and move these assets, these audio and special effects assets into this engine. It was pretty clear. It was obviously a huge win. Shout outs to those guys that worked on it. You know who you are if you ever end up watching this or listening to this video. So anyway, we had the gameplay already over those next few weeks. Just everything came together. I mean, it was just a really brilliant, high energy. I think they knew the stakes. It was a short timeline. And we got her done. And when that VP came up, I remember we demoed it and he was like, that's exceptional work. So we got to keep our jobs, which was great. I think we handled it very well. I think I was able to pitch our idea and give us enough time to be able to do what we need to do. And I give it up for the people, like the executive. He didn't shut it down right away. He was open and gave us a few weeks to prove him wrong, to develop a solution. So I really appreciate that looking back on it, because we were able to keep moving forward. And what ended up happening is I kind of went home and, slept, because I think we were like living at the office, some of us, during that time, because we really wanted to move forward with this project. He came back the next day. I think he flew back that night to LA, and then he gave me a call and he was just like, can you be at E3 in 5 weeks or 7 weeks or something like that? And I was like, that's impossible. What are you talking about? There's just a proof of concept, such a little demo. And he said, can you make it happen? It's such a big deal. I give you some more context at what was going through at that time is THQ was getting delisted from the NASDAQ because they were trading below $1. I think there's some rule if it trades below $1 for so many weeks, you get delisted. They needed a big win at E3 or it was going to go, like things were going to go even worse than it was already going because they already closed down a bunch of studios. So what we ended up doing is taking that challenge on, put together this amazing video and had some gameplay that we mixed in there, got the whole company around it and made it happen. And it was exceptional. I remember being able to go down and speak to all the, Wall Street, as they're called, all the investors that invest in the video game industry and the different publishers, and spoke to them and presented our game and a concept and we're going in the vision for it. And it was just really exciting going around because I think our stock price like skyrocketed right after that. They really liked what they were seeing, and everyone that saw the game just had really high expectations for it. And off to the races we were. Unfortunately, shortly after that, I think like 4 or 5 months, I actually was let go without cause from Relic, and that was a really difficult part. I didn't manage up very well, and I think that a lot of stuff happened around this huge win that I could have worked on a bit better, and I've spoken a little bit about it, but I'll share here briefly that it was, I really needed, I think at that time, a lot of recognition for all the risk and all the stuff we were doing. And I still remember the VP at the end of E3 in front of like the heads of Relic and my leads were like, Chad, you saved the company. Like, look at our stock. You did an amazing job. He came up and gave me a hug and a kiss. And at that moment, I could have shared the light with everyone. And I didn't really have that emotional maturity. And I also, because I think that I just needed that so bad. It was like the first time in my career, I was really getting that recognition from like a authority figure, a boss. I think growing up in my childhood, and I look back on it, I never really had a lot of people like my father or other men really give me that recognition. So I was just really needy for it, unfortunately. And I wasn't willing to share it with other people because I think looking back on it, if I could have just in that moment said, hey, if it wasn't for all these other guys that were there, I probably would have kept that job. There's probably some other things I could have done with resolving some of the issues with my boss and managing that a little bit better. But I know definitely that was a key moment that I learned a lot from you don't get anywhere by yourself. You really need a team of people around you and all your wins, all my big wins had so many people involved in it, so many people that I can acknowledge and really appreciate for those wins. All those wins that I shared with you, we had a team. There's always a team of people around me that really move things forward. So anyway, I was let go at that time, and that was a really difficult time. And I spent a few months kind of regrouping. But then, sure enough, I launched my next company, which I think in the next video, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about. So yeah, I went from being fired there in my lowest low to some of my biggest highs, because I think after I was able to process and work through all that, I was like, okay, what is next? What is next? And I think the next thing was like, I'm gonna just start my own company and do a raise. So I was actually able to go through and raised about $500,000 and launch Travel Interactive. That is still, you know, my company to this day. Really, the vision behind it was taking game mechanics and apply them to real world applications. Obviously, that turned into gamification and a bunch of things. And through the years, my investors at the time were a group of incredibly successful business guys and executives. And I was so grateful to have some of those guys working with me. I really learned a lot on how to manage, and I would love to share some of those lessons with you guys because everything kind of that I learned previously kind of went into that, and I still had to level up. Because now it was just more on me, because I think a lot of this stuff before I had like teams of really bright people where this was just on me. And I think there was a number of challenges. One of the things that my investor was really good at, Doug, that he would ask for updates and he would ask for feedback and he would give his point of view and share the reasons why, listen to us and get all the information and, give his recommendation. And then he would be like, let me know what you guys decide and walk out of the room, you know? And he was just like that. He really empowered us and he really didn't want to get involved in the day to day, but he would always share his experience and that with us. And I think that was so huge. It was so important at that time. Like we brought in so many amazing engineers at that time. Really, I think I even improved my hiring processes even more because we had to hire some people that were more junior that I could grow into these roles. And, some of those guys that we're able to work with were just exceptional. I know they've moved on to very senior roles at a whole bunch of really cool tech companies that like senior guys at Facebook and Elasticsearch and, Nick and, uh, and Brett, all you guys, yeah, Adam, God, so many of you from that time, really exceptional guys that I got to work with and build some really cool stuff with. That is, I think, some of the big learnings for me over that time is that I was working with my brother as my tech partner, and some of the issues that came up or just more on our roles and what we're responsible for, and not having that super clear, like down to the thing and down to like the specific details. We had a lot of the documentation and all that in place and what the roles were, but really the spirit of it, like when decisions need to be made, who would be making a call on this thing and who would make a call on this thing. And we ran into, I think, a lot of challenges just by being siblings to brothers, even though we worked together, a decade earlier at the electric playground and building the technology. It was just really clear our division where I probably was moving back and forth from technology because my background now is very much more after a decade in video games. I had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in that space, technically what could do and what couldn't be done. Well, I'd say for anyone that's doing this with a family member, I know some other brothers have been able to figure this out, but usually the older brother is the CEO. And I know talking to a counselor after, my brother moved on and um, years later, just talking about some of the conflict that came up was that I told her the hierarchy where I was the younger brother, but I was the CEO, and she was like, "Oh, that'll never work." I was just like, "Why?" And she goes, "You're going against the hierarchy of the family. Like, the older brother should be in charge. If he's not, you shouldn't work together." And I just thought that was super funny. She was just so quick to see this basic, um, the basic way of how we relate and how we grow up to be in conflict with how we structured the company. And I think that is a huge learning because I think that can apply to any relationship, how you interact with your with other people. There's going to be certain dynamics and ways of occurring and being that may y- may not work. And you need to see that right off the bat. And if you do move forward, I think just having what we didn't do a very good job of, we had clear roles. He was the head of technology. I was the CEO. But when we were in conflict, who would ultimately make a call on these different um, areas of our business? I think we needed to get really clear with that. Through all these issues and stuff that has come up has really led me to where we are because we scaled things, we pitched things, and there's so many things that I've learned through developing startup and building different software and being a consultant and working with so many entrepreneurs. Because even at that time, like part of our role was going to startup weekends and working with others, people of startup, and that led into consulting roles or advisory roles on different projects and helping people out, even working with different investor groups of being their advisor to help understand like where should they put their money into different projects and why, to really evaluate leadership teams and that sort of thing. And it's really been an incredible um like journey. And I think what I've been doing at the same time is as I figured out those systems and processes, I think that there was this time where what is the consistent thing that I keep getting into a roadblock around? And the roadblock I felt was always me. It was like my belief system, my mindset that came in the way. And I think that's really where I went on this journey of going inward. And really because I've polished and became an expert in all these business systems, it was really on this other side of really getting more awareness of myself, my own limiting beliefs, my own parts of myself that protect me or, you know, my other blind spots and that. And I think that that's really where I focused on over the last 15 years, really developing that and really getting more awareness. And when I've been doing that, I've moved through things so much quicker and be able to apply it. And that's really what I'm giving back to now. And all my consulting, I work with just a few founders at a time in one-on-one, more group kind of coaching stuff that I do that I love the group stuff, but I also really love getting into one-on-one and get into details of it. But it's really looking at the systems and when the systems, those core business systems that we know that work, when they start breaking down or or the entrepreneurs having a challenge to implement them, really what is going on? What is the issue behind it? And it usually comes back to something about the founder. And we have ways of working within and frameworks that we address that I share. And I think that's really what is so exciting for me is like through like this long career of working in startup and working with big companies and going through growth and scaling companies and scaling my own companies and scaling, I guess, new teams within these big companies is just taking this wealth of experience and all this heartache and being able to share that with other entrepreneurs and be able to call it out and help them through it is not just the business systems, but when they start getting in the way because maybe the stuff that came up through childhood or through the course of their relationships through business that is getting in the way that maybe they don't see. And that's really what I love is being able to bring business systems and the inner work and having systems and frameworks to help people get more awareness to help them scale and really expand their operating system to new levels. So I hope that this has been helpful to really understand my journey and kind of where I've pulled from and maybe some of the ups and downs along the way. But I think through all of that, I can look back on it with, this lens of it was all absolutely necessary and all amazing. I learned so much from everything, and now I have all the wisdom from all of those experiences that I get to share and communicate through my different channels and be able to help entrepreneurs. Obviously, learn things that maybe took me years to do. I can communicate in an hour meeting or teach them a framework that I've been able to take a lot of this wisdom and break it down. And even seeing some of the core business systems that are out there, being able to take them in and just see how they apply. Because what I've seen too is through a lot of coaching programs that I went through is that a lot of it may work for certain teams, but even when a lot of teams are working with some of these business systems, it's almost like a lot more theater than reality. And I say that because it's like, I think you need to simplify things, you need to build on things, and it can take, you know, several months and years realistically to really implement and upgrade your business operating system. Because it's not just the operating system that needs to be evolved, the leadership team needs to evolve. You need to evolve if you're the founder or the CEO. You need to level up on all your habits, on the way that you occur, how you deal with things, deal with those difficult conversations, deal with issues. Like, what are your frameworks? What are your feedback loops? What are your learning loops that you have installed? And how often do you go about that? How do you organize your day and structure your day? How consistent is a day? If I look at your calendar, can we really see if you're going to be successful or not? And it's really comes down to that, is like, where are you spending your time on that? And there's so much to talk about and share. If any of this stuff seems resonate for you, if you think that, that I can help you in any way on scale your company or work through any of your roadblocks, definitely reach out. We'll, add a comment below, go to my Instagram and direct message me there. It's C McFarlin. And let's connect and level up together.